Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Jason Douglas. Jason, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me on. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to be here.
It is my honor to have you here. But before we talk about why you're here, Jason, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are Northville-based, Plymouth raised, MSU educated, Michigan, baby. The Michigan authors of comic, stage plays, and prose. You've been a public school teacher for the last 25 years as well, which means that while your entry into the world of published comics is relatively new, fresh, and exciting, you are no spring chicken, my friend. But first off, let's talk about Parallel. That was your first published comic, sold out of its initial SPP print run, and garnered not one but two Ringo Award nominations for Best Writer and Best Single Issue or Story. So what were some of your influences for Parallel, and what did it feel like to be able to, a lifetime of work, come out and get those awards from the Ringo, or get the nominations?
Absolutely crazy, absolutely surreal. Because you've got this idea since I was probably 12 of like that would be awesome, right? Like it's that childhood dream. I think it's that pipe dream that a lot of people who are into comics have. But like most people, like 99% of people who love comics, I dreams deferred, right, man? Like just like
Mhm.
set it aside, and literally for decades. So not a lifetime of work, literally a lifetime of setting it aside. And then
Mhm.
I was writing plays for these drama clubs that I was running at the elementary school and middle school level of the schools that I worked at. And one year I sat down in the summer, instead of writing a new one act play, I was like, it's time. Like I need to write a comic. How hard could it be? Way harder. Like the blissful ignorance and irrational confidence of literally just going, I'm just going to do it, is
I
the
love
only thing that probably allowed it to happen. Had I known what a different animal it is, and kind of, in my opinion, how many more things you're juggling in your mind, physically and mentally, as you're writing a detailed comic script, it probably would have scared me off for another couple of decades. And I sat down and I know, man. And then it was basically the genre idea, because Parallel is kind of like a dark, twisted sci-fi story, and the genre idea came from a discussion I had with a fellow comic book nerd buddy of mine that we went to college to become teachers with at MSU, and then he teaches up here and I teach down here, and that phone conversation combined with my own existential dread about time passing, my own maybe midlife crisis, right, that got me off my butt, and then this conversation that I had with a former student who was literally going through like the quarter life crisis that Landon goes through in the book of, you're 22 and your entire life is in front of you and your dream seems almost certain. Blink your eyes, set it aside for a moment to pay a bill, to have a bit of comfort, whatever. You wake up, 8 years have passed, and it's probably too late. And those things just kind of like, I mean, literally a cliched light bulb above the head, the lightning strike or whatever kind of hit.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
like, there's my story. And I started writing that first script about those things that are universal to everybody, right? Time passing, dreams deferred. Did I make the right decisions? Is it too late? Combined with the fact that, comic book nerd in me wanted to wrap it in a genre that, certain other fans can relate to as well and dig.
So, did you grow up a big comic book fan then?
Yeah, for as atypical as the story is about how Parallel came to be and got published, not the way comics are made in the 21st century. I mean, like a publisher bought it from me day one, right? This was not a
Hmm.
Kickstarter project. This was like, at that time, kind of like a mid-major expanding indie company said, we're going to make this and put it into the world, going to hold your hand through it. As atypical as that was, my comic story is pretty typical, other than that I got a late start. And like when we talk about anything else, when we talk about horror, same thing. I did not have cool parents. I did not have an older sibling. I didn't have that guy down the street who was like, check this out, do this. So I came to everything late, but I've got this really high functioning OCD. I like to call it more like a collector mentality, where it's like all or nothing. So like once I
Yeah.
was into
Yeah.
something, I wanted all of it. And comics hit at a certain age, probably not until I was about 12. But as soon as I was in, I was in. Um, Collected like a mad fiend, a nice balance between collector and reader. They didn't really compete. They were kind of these separate halves of me. And
Sure.
but I did the typical part was I stepped away like in my mid late teens for 9 years. And I think the only two comics that I took with me into like took to college and took into my young adulthood, I took Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and I took Art Spiegelman's Mouse. And those followed me, but everything else kind of got set aside, right? Step back into the store like 9 years later in my mid 20s, whatever it was, and then I've been hooked ever since. Right back
Sure.
to that 50-50 split, though, right? Half collector, I need my runs, I need my keys, I'm out hunting, digging through long boxes, looking up the wall, and then half reader. I mean, you can see the shelf behind. It's Stephen
Yeah.
King up top. It's Walking Dead and Mike Mignola and Conan and big chunks of runs of authors that I love or universes that I love down below.
Sure. I mean, another thing when it comes to comics, do you illustrate as well, or do you have an illustrator for yourself?
Oh, dude, you don't want to see my drawings. Nobody wants to see my drawings. In fact, can I tell you, it is so like every once in a while, depending on the artist you're working with, you might even as detailed as my scripts are with panel layout and page layout, right? Even at the most detailed and kind of meticulous they are, there's times where it doesn't translate beautifully, and I'll have to draw a panel layout and like I'm embarrassed every time I've got to like text that to an artist I'm working with. I'm like, just forgive me that this is what you're going to have to deal with. I used a ruler. It still looks like crap, but yeah, you don't want my drawings. You definitely maybe want my words, but not my drawings. So yeah, I work with an illustrator each and every time out.
That's awesome. And now something else I want to talk about before we get into why you're here is Jane American. And
Yeah.
guys, you know I don't bullshit when I'm on here. That's not something I do. I'm always very truthful, very honest. I met Jason at a convention and we went to his table and my daughter Chloe got the first issue of Jane American and read it on the way home and absolutely adored it. So when I talk about Jane American, it's a 32-page one-shot in partnership with Comics Wellspring. It is set in historic Plymouth, Michigan. Set in Michigan, as you all know, I love. And inspired by and dedicated to the love of his late grandparents, who were long-term pillars of the community. So, can you tell us a little bit, obviously spoiler-free, about Jane American?
Yeah, so Jane is she's a kid who it's a World War II coming of age story. And during the war she's kind of living a life of family stability and hope until she's not. Until war literally brings tragedy to her front doorstep, changes her in unbelievable ways that are better left hidden. Okay. But the end of the war has left this reality. Dad's not coming home. Society says mom can no longer be a Rosie the Riveter. They've left Jane with a choice. She can stay safe, she can stay hidden, or she can embrace who she really is and now what she can truly do for the sake of everybody that she loves. And kind of like Parallel is chock full of universal relatable themes about existential dread, about time passing and dreams deferred, but it's really wrapped in that sci-fi wrapping paper. Jane American is about those universal relatable themes about identity and self-worth and coming of age and you being you in a world that tells you something different, but it's wrapped in a very familiar wrapping paper for comic fans of ordinary person being able to do something extraordinary. And you mentioned it's like named after and dedicated to my late grandmother. It's very much dedicated to every kid who's gone through my classroom the last 25 years who still struggles with identity issues today. And then it's much more recently dedicated to my late grandfather, who just last year at the age of 99, when he realized he wasn't going to see 100, made me promise that the book that contains the name and likeness of his high school sweetheart would see print. Now, that one shot that your daughter read, I mean, we put that out last year, and that was made in a much more typical 21st century manner. But what I have now are the 140-page hardcover and softcover versions of Jane. Sina Grace, formerly of Walking Dead, now of Superman fame, did this beautiful wraparound hardcover. And Lauren Nalepa, a friend of mine since she was a little kid, an art teacher in Plymouth, Michigan, and about to be a superstar in the comic world with some published comics, wrote or did the cover, the wraparound cover for the softcover.
That's amazing. And I don't normally do this, guys, as you know, but we have a guest here real quick.
Yes, come on. Hey, kid, how's it
Hi,
going?
I really like the comic that he made, and I think you guys should really check it out.
Thank you so much. Listen. It was delightful meeting you, and thank you so much for reading, kiddo. I appreciate
He
it.
said it was amazing meeting you. All right, love
No,
you. All right, guys. So, like she said, It's amazing, and you should check it out. And the best way to do that is by clicking the links down in the description. Not only do I have Jason's social media down there, I've got the links to all his books. And you never know, if you DM him on Instagram, he may just have a little something special to say to you. So make sure
Oh
you're
yeah.
following him on social media. And like I said, make sure you're checking out the books, because that's not lip service, guys. I don't bullshit on here, and you all know that. Chloe got that book. She read it the whole way home. She adored it. I got a hold of him right after. I was like, dude, my daughter loved your book. What do we got to do to make an episode happen with you? So that's how much it meant to my daughter. She just wanted to even come down just to tell you guys how much she loved Jane American.
I'm going to tell you that before we move on. You hit me up and you want one of those hardcovers or softcovers, I'll send it to you. Okay. Those are not premiering, because those ones I did on my own, those are not premiering until February at my first con of 2025. But I will send you one right now. But here's something special. So, Parallel Special Edition, right? My first book. It's dark, okay? It is dark sci-fi. It's got some horror elements. I literally only have 3 left in the world. You hit me up with that, I will send you one of my last 3 copies. This is a good read too.
So those links are right in the description, guys. So first come, first serve, obviously. So if you want one, make sure you're hitting him up. So, man, in order for you to be into sci-fi, horror, darkness like that, horror had to start for you somewhere, my friend. So now, Jason, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Jason, the first horror movie you watched was?
The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece from 1980, Stephen King's least liked adaptation of one of his best books. But I do not fault either of them on that. It is a classic, and it was honestly the first horror movie I saw. We're not counting Jaws, which came before that for me, but it's The Shining, and it really set the tone for me in so many ways.
Yeah.
But it was definitely first, and and probably too young, whatever your definition of that is, but it was my first one.
I don't think there's such thing as too young. And now this is something I've said on the podcast before. And again,
Yeah.
this is one man's opinion. I am in no way a psychologist. I am in no way educated in this. This is just one man's opinion. I feel like the kids that watch horror, they get the education to go along with it, are more grounded in reality because they understand the difference between fantasy and reality. They get that groundedness. And like with our daughters, like I've met my son too. He's 16. Never forced any of my kids to watch horror. When they came to me and they were ready, and especially with my girls, one big thing we do is we watch a lot of behind the scenes stuff on the Blu-ray, so that they see how the movie was made. They see these are all people. These are just actors that are out having fun. My girls went to set with me on the movies I've been involved with to see, like, this is dad having fun. This is dad being an actor. This is not real. If you really hurt somebody, you can't take that back. You can't call cut, redo. So that's my advice to people. If you're wondering when's the good age to get your children into horror, there's no perfect answer because every kid is different.
It's such a good point you make. It's something that I like literally bring up with my 8th graders on day one. Like your age is this arbitrary number. Like whatever you give me, that's what you. If you come to me as a 5-year-old, I've raised 3 of them. I know what to do about that. You want to have some bizarre at 14, 13 years old conversation as if you're a 35-year-old adult and you want to talk about like gardening. We can do that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's what you're ready for. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's, I mean, the experience that I had with my youngest, who is literally the reason why I got back into horror the last couple of years, was because, my youngest was my creepy kid and she was into it and she wanted access to it. And like same thing, like I showed it to her in quotes, way too young, whatever that means, yet it was perfect for her. And now she's turned into this well-adjusted kid who happens that her favorite movie is, also The Shining.
And see, that's the thing. Like, I just think it comes with education. It's just like anything in life. You do it, if you do it responsibly, I don't think there's a perfect age for that type of stuff. So,
it's funny, like you like we talk about like too young. So like in my opinion, and again, I'm gonna keep on saying it in quotes because I don't mean it the way that it's coming across, but like I read that 12 and it haunted me for 6 months. Because
right.
they're 12 in it, and it like broke my brain, and I was too young to read it, and yet that's such a formative memory to me. It is such something that forms like that, looking back with that nostalgia of like, oh my God, I didn't sleep well for 6 months, and yet it pushed my reading boundaries way beyond what else I was reading at 12 years old. Like it did
Sure.
me so much more good and I than it did me harm, that like again, that too young thing, it's pretty darn meaningless.
I agree. It's because, like I said, no kid is the same. No kid grows at the same rate. No kid develops mentally at the same rate. So it's different for every single kid on when they're ready and what they're ready for. Um, People can say I'm a bad parent all they want if I let my kids watch horror. I took my daughter, who's 4, to see Abigail. My wife and I went and seen it first,
Uh,
and we took her to see it. She loved it. She was Abigail for Halloween. Um, and like I said, it's we educate about the difference between fantasy and reality. What you see on TV is not real life. This is why it's different. We get the Blu-ray, we watch the special features. You see that Amy's just a little girl, you know.
well, even outside of that, like just the theater going experience with horror. There's a theater going experience that you and I grew up with, that communal experience that applied to most movies, that
Mhm.
honestly right now in 2024 is kind of only reserved for horror movies. There is not that big. I mean Barbie and Oppenheimer last year had it, right? Like that everybody's going, you're sitting in a full theater and you communally experience something that is culturally, crossing a lot of boundaries. But consistently, it's kind of only horrors left, and like watching that in a theater with other people is like, it's a cool, culturally educating experience, almost no matter what age you are.
I completely agree. And taking them to see horror in the theaters for the first time, it's amazing to watch their reactions. It makes me appreciate the movie even more to see what my daughters feel when they're watching these movies. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, with The Shining, you said you watched it a little too young, but do you remember who you watched it with?
I have no memory of who I watched it with the first time. I know that repeat viewings were with my next door neighbors, next door, that lived next door to me. A boy a year younger than me and a boy 2 years younger than me, and we had this thing where I'd sleep over there most weekends. I don't know. It was one of those things like you don't even knock, you just come in and you go in the fridge, and we would
Yep.
do this thing. I think I told you about this when we met at the show. Like our habit was we go to Blockbuster and we would rent something to scare us, and then we read like the palate cleanser so we could sleep that night. And it usually went something. It was either The Shining or Pet Cemetery or one of the two Creep shows, or maybe even if we were feeling a little weaker, like a Tales from the Dark Side, and
Yeah.
then something where Arnold Schwarzenegger is blowing up a lot of stuff to cleanse that palate, and then we could sleep. But we would watch The Shining over and over again, and my gut says I watched it with them first because we didn't have cable for a long time. And
Sure.
you didn't see The Shining on network TV the same way you saw slashers, like on the UHF channels. Like
Right.
I don't know, in Southeast Michigan we had like channel 20 and 50, and they'd have like Shocktober. And I was always loved the idea of it, too scared to watch that stuff. And so we watched The Shining, and it was on, so it's the whole thing. It's not cut, it's not edited. And what kind of blew me away was, even at that young age, I knew I was watching. I knew I was watching. I mean, I didn't know this term. I didn't know the difference between like film, and movie, but I knew I was watching something
Right.
that was elevated artistically more than anything else I was watching, scary or
Sure.
not. And so there was something captivating about that. I probably couldn't have described to you the feeling of dread, the feeling of just tension that runs throughout that film, right? It's not a jump
Yeah.
scare movie. It's not a jump scare
No.
movie. There wasn't a lot of jump scare movies in 1980. There's a handful of things that precede it that have what becomes the modern jump scare, but The Shining isn't that. It is terrifying for reasons that a kid can't explain. I mean, a kid can't relate to the addiction themes running throughout it. A kid can't relate to that middle-aged dread about like an unfulfilled dream or life ambition of Jack Torrance as a writer. Like that doesn't mean anything to you, but you still feel something unsettling about it. And
Mhm.
then there's a handful of scenes that I don't care how old you are, they are disturbing and terrifying and will burn themselves on your neurons, and you'll never be able to close your eyes again without seeing a few of those.
You talk about the jump scares. I can really only think of one jump scare throughout the whole movie, and that's Dick Halloran's death. When he comes around the corner and Jack jumps out with that axe. Like,
Right.
that's really the only jump scare. Besides that, you're right. It's that existential dread
Yeah.
of, and you have Danny. We're young boys when we're watching this for the first time, and who do we relate to? We relate to Danny. And when he's talking with his finger, when he's writing red rum on the door, you have all these moments that as children, we're like, I don't identify with, like you said, the writer's block or the alcohol
Yeah.
addiction or anything like that. But I understand this little boy doing these scary things.
Yes. And like the Halloran thing, like Scatman Crothers getting axed in that is is a jump scare, sure, but it's also disturbing because it's such a tonal shift. Because
Yeah,
it's like the only true like physical violence besides like the bat being swung almost in the entire thing. And it catches you off guard because it's not how the rest of it goes, right? Like the other things
right.
that are scary are just like sitting there staring at you, or I mean, we're gonna get to this, but I mean, the thing that sent me over the edge as a kid, the thing that for years my temptation was to do this.
Let's talk about it now, man. The scene that affected you the most. What
The
was it?
scene that affected me the most, and especially when you hit a certain age, I mean, the biggest conflict in this movie for any like 8 to 12-year-old boy is the conflicting things your body and mind are telling you when a woman gets out of a tub looking a certain way and a certain appeal to a certain boy of a certain age, and then just literally rotting in front of your eyes and
Yes.
being this horrifying image that you can't, because the whatever in you doesn't want to look away, and then even when you know it's coming, like it was just this for me. And like it haunted me to no end. As much as the twins were terrifying, right? As much as God, you know what else? I mean, the secondary, almost more than the twins, almost more than anything else. Do you know when Danny's having his it's that fit, and he's like shaking and his eyes are open, he's like going like this, like that haunted me almost more than anything else besides the tub. I mean, the tub, I just couldn't, and yet I couldn't look away. The
Right.
parallel I make to that, and it's done again in a King adaptation, the other one that I found myself for years like literally covering my eyes, is what me and my neighbors, we called her Twisted Sister from Pet Cemetery. And it's the flashback to the sister that mom's got to take care of. And that's actually, I don't know if you know this, but like I believe that's is that the director? Like kind of he's playing a withered up because he was so gaunt and thin. No, because that's a female director. Anyway, it's somebody associated, like one of the writers or whatever, and he's in the makeup or whatever, but he's playing, her sister who's got,
Zelda.
yeah, Zell, and she's got the spinal disease and stuff like that. And that was the other one where it was just such a horrific image and coming at you and engaging you as an audience. I mean, in the tub, she steps out and goes to our point of view character in that way, and they're embracing it. It's there and it's in your face. And Zelda is like screaming and calling to you in the point of view thing, and like not letting you pull away from it. And it's relentless in both scenes because it's right there forcing you to deal with it. And like my first two scenes where I had to look away but couldn't look away at the same time.
And it's funny you say that because um, Zelda's probably one of the things that haunts everybody's dreams.
Mhm.
That's nightmare fuel for a lot of people. And to find out later on that it was a guy,
Right.
in a suit, they had to do makeup for 19 hours to do that. It's like, damn, man, like what an incredibly heavy scene for someone to have to go through.
For sure. For sure. So like those are the kind of things that for years, like I needed the palate cleanser because when I was closing my eyes, those images just stayed there.
Right. Well, let's also talk about, right now in Hollywood, remakes, requels, sequels, it's kind of all the rage. We did get a sequel to The Shining and Doctor Sleep. Did you see Doctor Sleep? And if so, what was your opinion?
So brought it with me because I have very strong opinions. So this is my daughter's second or third favorite movie. Now she has never seen the theatrical cut, which is, I think, less than successful, though Flanagan did what he could with it. Um, if you're a film nerd, you probably already know this. If you're a horror nerd, you probably already know this. But the director's cut is a legitimate masterpiece, in my opinion. I mean, Flanagan is a talented dude. His TV work, his movie work, and the fact that right now in this moment that we're talking, the potential for an even bigger rise is like on the horizon with his new adaptation that is getting awards, recognition in Europe right now, and the fact that he holds the keys to Dark Tower universe right now is
Mhm.
big. But Doctor Sleep director's cut, there is something truly magical about what he did, about taking, we briefly mentioned this long-standing, the most famous author versus filmmaker, adaptation conflict maybe in film history, Kubrick versus King. And he almost flawlessly in the director's cut weaves through this tiny little eye hole of a needle, somehow making this thing that not only it plays homage to Doctor Sleep as a novel, but somehow weds the Kubrick 80 version
Yeah.
and the novel. And does it in such a way that I'm in awe of it. Like there are scenes in that. Okay. I think that first murder of the ball player, of the boy, is one of the hardest things for me to watch on screen as an adult. Because the way it's filmed, because the acting performances in it, because of being a father.
Yeah.
But when I watch that movie, what I'm mostly in awe of is that seamless thing that he brought something full circle that literally for 40 years sat there as the unsolvable conflict, right?
Mhm. Well,
And
and I've
he
said
did it
numerous times, Doctor Sleep is my favorite horror sequel of all time. I
so
think
good.
I
It's
think Rose the
so good.
Hat is beautiful and scary, and she's a great leader. She's my favorite female villain of all time.
Rebecca
Um,
Ferguson is
oh,
unbelievable. Like that's where I bought season tickets for Rebecca Ferguson, right?
yep,
Mission Impossible stuff, Dune stuff, great, even Greatest Showman, right? She's like stunning in that, but like that Doctor Sleep is what I was like that I'm with her as long as she's making movies.
yep, 100%. And like I said, I would love to see a prequel to Doctor Sleep or a sequel. And I know people are like, well, it's already a sequel. I know, but I'd like to see a prequel following Rose the Hat and the True Knot and see like how they got started and how they came to be and how they ended up where they are. And I would like to see a sequel following Abra in the future to see what
Sure.
happened to her, see
Yeah.
where she goes from here.
I want to say this about Doctor Sleep too. I really appreciate it when a film that uses either legacy characters or even like what we do in the beginning of Doctor Sleep when we see Danny right young and like the Shelley Duvall character as mom, and they're played by different actors, and there's the non Scatman Crothers, right? And they don't, and even the Jack scene back in the Overlook, right, at the bar, and it's like I like it when a filmmaker makes a choice where they don't force their hand with mimicry,
Mhm.
they don't force their hand with de-aging or CGI, like we're just going to try to Valley of the Dolls recreate the thing,
Sure.
and yet And yet there is not a moment where when those characters came up that I'm taken out of it for a second going, oh,
Right.
it's not them. It was
And Henry
totally
Thomas killed it.
right. Right. Absolutely. I
And
think
I try to
because
tell people, like, they're like, well, he wasn't Jack Nicholson. I'm like, you're right. He was not Jack Nicholson. He
dude,
was Jack Torrance, and
right.
he nailed it.
And like I think that was maybe one of the smarter, subtler decisions in that film because of the ambiguity of what Jack was to that hotel. Because I mean, you know
Yeah.
that scene in The Shining with the picture, like what does that mean? Has he been there whole time? Is he part of it? Is it something else? Like the fact that you go there and for a lot of people, you look at that bar scene in Doctor Sleep and go, wait, is that supposed to? Sometimes it doesn't even register to somebody until like Danny's like, Dad, this, and you go,
Dad.
oh, which I think actually heightens it because he's lost his Jackness there. He is part of the hotel at that point, even though it's him, it's not him, and I think that even works better than
Yeah.
because there's a half a dozen actors who could have done a straight up impression and even had more physicality that looked like him. And I don't think it works as well.
No, I agree with you. I think that to be fair, I am a huge Henry Thomas fan, and that guy can do no wrong to me. He is one of genuinely my favorite actors. So to see everything he's done with Flanagan stuff, whether it was The Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor, all the stuff that Henry Thomas has done, Ouija Origins of Evil, to see the steps that Henry Thomas has taken from being the young boy in E.T. to the amazing actor that he is now.
Right.
I've always been a huge fan of his. And when I heard that he was being cast as Jack Torrance, I was like, let's fucking go. He is going to nail it. And that's what I've always looked at it. He wasn't channeling Jack Nicholson. He was channeling Jack Torrance. And I thought he played the role exceptionally well.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that you're such a fan of that because like within certain circles like it's kind of almost taken as rote that director's cut is like a masterpiece. But like everybody else and even like a casual King fan kind of dismisses it.
I
And
don't
and,
get
and
it.
yeah, and I know that part of that has to do with the theatrical cut was butchered and Flanagan didn't have final cut and what that means and what results. But it's kind of funny because like sometimes trust your filmmakers because if you look at the added footage, it's not like a ton of major plot points. It's just more depth.
Connective
To
tissue.
like Rose just breathes and lives so much more in the director's cut.
Yeah.
And that's the key, I think.
And like I said, the minute I heard that Flanagan got this, Flanagan, when he got Dr. Sleep, wasn't the Flanagan that he is now, sure.
No,
But
no.
you still knew it was in good hands. We had seen Oculus, we had seen Ouija Origins of Evil, we had seen Before I Wake. So like we had seen these Flanagan films, and we're like, this guy definitely has the potential to take this and run with it. And that's exactly what him and that casting crew did. To this day, I put it above Aliens. I put it above Terminator 2. I put it above Evil Dead 2. It is hands down, without a doubt, my favorite horror sequel of all time. I remember even when we saw the theatrical cut, I remember leaving the theater like, even if you've never seen The Shining, this movie will make sense to you. That's what I
Yeah,
was
for
scared of.
sure.
I was scared that this was going to be crutched by The Shining. And so when you get to that third act, you get all the Easter eggs of The Shining. I was like, okay, that's dope. But you didn't need to know what that was in order to enjoy or even understand what Dr. Sleep was. And that's a very hard thing to do with such a big sequel. A lot of people, I think, went into it looking for more Shining. That were Shining fans and they didn't get it. So they were like, oh, it's its own movie type thing. It's like, yeah, it is. You get the Easter eggs when you get, to the Overlook. You get all your Easter eggs there. But before then, there's just tiny little bits, and all the rest is all on Dr. Sleep, the novel, and Mike Flanagan and his writing of what he did. So
It's more thematic than because you obviously have Danny's addiction issues. You obviously have uh, um, Danny's mentorship of Abra takes center stage, whereas
yes.
like you know the Scatman Crothers mentorship of Danny is a sliver, right? And this is like what works is thematically, right? Like I'm going to do better. I mean, you did great by me. I mean, I'm probably alive because of the work that you did back in the day, but I'm going to reject it. And then when I embrace it, I'm going to do everything for this kid to make sure they continue on the world. I love it. I love it. Now, really quick, I know we don't have a ton of time, but since we're on, Shining themed things, I don't know what kind of King reader you are, but do you know the book Revival?
No.
So is it Revival? Is it Revival? It's one of his the last, 10 years novels. And is it no, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna blow this because it's one of like three novels, and I don't want to go dig and I don't want to give you dead air. But listen, there is a scene. So you know how like King readers will know that even non-Dark Tower books, dozens of them have connections to Dark Tower, right?
Yes.
You've got breakers here. You got, I mean, literally, people with the shine are used by various characters in the King universe to help, break the beams and blah 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 blah. It's all connected. But there is this one other novel. It's a 21st century King novel, and I can't remember which one it was. It might be, oh God, it might be the one with the assassin fairly recently. Anyway, there is a safe house that they go to in Colorado. And he
Oh,
goes and he hangs out on this mountain. And when you look out over, like on certain nights, you can see the ghost of this hotel. And like your mind starts to get screwed with, and you start to like lose track of time. And there's this painting in there, and then you can see it out the window and stuff. And you're like, and some people, depending on where you are as a reader, you're like, well, okay, that's just a little weird little quirking thing, but it's the ghost of the Overlook sitting out there after it blows up and burns down, and it's just kind of one of those beautiful things that makes you really, really, those Easter eggs that just delight you to no end. And I love that it's
right.
a direct Shining reference as opposed to connected to anything else.
And I love that. I love how King does that. Even with his movies. If you watch the movie The Mist, at the beginning, there's a painting in the house of the gunslinger.
Right. He's like Thomas Jane is like he's the guy commissioned to do that
Yeah.
poster. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. Because I'm a huge fan of the Dark Tower too, so I can't wait to see what Flanagan does with it.
Oh my
So
God. If it's done right, dude, finally, I mean, it could be amazing.
yeah. Well, we've talked about The Shining being your first horror movie and what that means to you.
Yeah,
But here for a second, Jason, I do got a little bit of a curveball I want to throw your way.
do
My
it.
little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you.
Okay.
What's your favorite scary movie, Jason? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
My favorite. My favorite. Um, this is one of those questions that I consider an impossible and unfair question. If
Hmm.
you ask me my top five favorite bands, I can tell you, but it's going to be 20. If you ask
Sure.
me my top five favorite movies, I can tell you, but it's going to be 35. Um, and it changes quite rapidly. Right now, because of something that's going to be released on Christmas Day, I am very much in this moment gonna say, and this is another one of those things. It has a tone like The Shining because it is not about jump scares. It is about constant tension and dread and a crescendo that I cannot think be beat. And it's of course Robert Eggers'
The Witch.
The Witch. Now this is up there. This is also like a top five for my youngest, and I'm just picking that because it's more modern, right? And for me, it's hard to beat movies that were formative when I was younger, right? Whether they are great or not. I mean, if you asked me when I was like 15, I might have said Pumpkinhead, but that's not an answer for anybody to give. I don't even care if you're a Pumpkinhead fan. It is not a good movie. The Witch is legit crazy good. Again, like The Shining, I think a beautifully constructed film, as well as terrifying in ways that it's kind of hard to put your finger on besides that escalating dread. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it still affects me. Put it this way, on one of our rewatches, I knew it does its job because on one of our rewatches, my daughter and I are watching it downstairs. My wife decides she's going to get involved. This is not something that happens. And as soon as that baby disappears, she's like, oh, nope,
Yep.
enough for me.
See ya.
And out, gone. Right there, sign of a good one.
Yes. And Robert Eggers just has a way of making his period pieces so impactful and hit so hard because they are so genuine and real feeling that I'm very excited for his Nosferatu. I'm beyond
Me too.
excited for that. So
Me too.
man, I've had an amazing time with you talking about your first and favorite horror movies, but before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to The Shining. And what we're going to do here, Jason, is rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction. We're not being critics. All we're doing is ranking The Shining on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Jason, what would your ranking of The Shining be?
Oh, 5 skulls without a doubt. I mean, it hurt my brain. It made me turn away. It made me not be able to look away. And clearly, it's now been, it's been almost 40 years since I've seen it. And look at the way we talked about it today. You know what I mean? Had I not rewatched it dozens of times between then and now, I feel like I'd still talk about it with that same amount of impact and passion, no matter what. It's for being a relative flop and ignored by the critics at the time. I love
Yeah.
it when finally history gets on the right side and like the masterpiece is recognized for what it is. And then like you said, I think it's only enriched by the fact that somebody with as much skill and talent and care as Flanagan comes along and almost closes that circle and justifies that whole thing being this wonderful story that now kind of wraps around in a very brilliant way.
Yes. And the thing with The Shining too is it's so universal that
Yeah.
people that have never even seen it, they know what the sound it makes when Danny's riding his tricycle across the floor. Every single person, whether you've seen The Shining or not, 'cause it's been parodied to death and done to death, knows.
Here's Johnny.
People know these things without ever seeing the movie, and that's why it's such a cultural phenomenon.
Right here, Johnny, is a pop culture now reference that has outlived what it was referencing. Like
Right.
it's in that movie because Johnny Carson is ubiquitous in 1980. He is literally show business.
Yeah.
And
that was an ad-lib line.
Jack Torrance has outlived. There is not a kid who watches Shining today and has any idea that the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson even existed, much less the cultural hold it had on the world. And yet The Shining and that line does.
Right. And like I said, that was a complete ad-lib by Jack Nicholson.
Right.
Complete ad-lib line. And it's amazing. And you talked about how it's a flop. It's amazing to see the movies today that are just cultural icons to us. The Shining, The Thing, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. These movies that were critically panned when they came out, and the audiences hated them. And you go back and you're like, why? What the fuck were you guys thinking? Like, why didn't you like this?
I like a good reclamation project.
Yes.
Yeah.
But man, I did have an amazing time hanging out with you and everybody else. I know I said it at the beginning, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, I have all of Jason's links down in the description. I want to remind you that. Make sure you're hitting up Instagram, sending him a DM, let him know Sledgehammer Horror sent you. I promise you, you're not going to regret it. So, Jason, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you. Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. It does help build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.